Edison-Chinzaemon the Silent. A very long time ago, there lived a moron named Chinzaemon. His swords were very beautiful and perfectly balanced. He was famous throughout the land for the quality of his work. Even more famous than his swords, however, were his covers. Swords slipped into them so easily and silently that other Amoras began to call him Chinzaemon the Silent. A very powerful prince heard about Chinzaemon. The prince summoned the Amora to his court. The prince admired the work of the famous silent Amora. He wanted Chinzaemon to make weapons for his soldiers and guards. Chinzaemon was not only a skillful Amora, he was also very funny and clever. He enjoyed playing practical jokes on people. He had been a very funny child in his school. Even while serving his time as an apprentice Amora, he continued to tell jokes and play pranks on people. Few people knew that Chinzaemon was such a funny man. He only shared his jokes with people he trusted. So when he made the prince laugh and laugh for the whole 30 hours of his visit, Chinzaemon was hired as the prince's new Amor. And no one was more surprised than Chinzaemon. The prince must be a nobleman. He thought to himself, I will trust him and be very loyal. One night Chinzaemon decided he would play a joke on the guards. He knew that some of them fell asleep while they were on duty. He thought it would be humorous to catch them sleeping on the job. They would be very embarrassed. So Chinzaemon waited until it was very late in the night and quietly left his room. He moved silently throughout the hallways until he was out on the palace grounds. Chinzaemon sneaked out to the gate where two guards were sleeping, using very strong glue made from Chi-sharp, glued their sandals to the ground. They were very quiet that he did not disturb them. He did the same thing to four other guards who had fallen asleep. When Chinzaemon was done gluing the guard's sandal to the ground, he told some other guards about his plan. He then told the head guard and persuaded him to sound the alarm. A very loud bell was rung that signaled an attack. All the guards came running except the six who were stuck to the ground. They were glued into place. They couldn't unlace their sandals quickly enough to avoid getting caught. When the prince came out of his palace to see what happened, he was still in his night clothes. The head guard informed him of Chinzaemon's prank. Chinzaemon was afraid that the prince might be angry. He hadn't meant for his little joke to make the prince get out of bed. But the prince was not angry. For a minute he stood silent and then began to laugh. He laughed so hard that he had to bend over to catch his breath. The other guards laughed as well. They were glad they weren't the ones who had been cuffed. When the prince finished laughing, he told the guards who had been sleeping that they were fine. He also told them that they were lucky he did not have them beheaded. Later that day, the prince summoned Chinzaemon to his chambers. So the prince began, You have caused me to fire 6 worthless guards. Thank you, the silent one. The prince smiled so that Chinzaemon would know he wasn't angry. You are welcome. Chinzaemon replied, "But I was only meaning to play a joke." He was a little nervous, but he sensed that the prince was truly grateful for what he had done. "Well, I feel safer now," the prince said. "You may have saved my life. In return, I will grant you anything you wish." Shindaemon thought about it for a minute. He already had a good life, but then he realized he could use this offer to play a big prank on the courtiers of the prince's court. "Well, noble prince, I have one request." He was a bit embarrassed to ask for what he wanted, but he did so anyway. "Allow me, whenever I want, to slip into your ear." The prince was shocked. "Strange," he shouted, laughing again. "You could have chosen anything, gold, silver, land. I don't understand your request. But if that is all your request, it is yours." "You couldn't have given me anything better, noble prince," said Shindaemon, smiling. The next week there was a large gathering at the palace. All the prince's ministers came, and as did the courtiers, and everyone brought their wives and dressed in their finest clothes. Every month the prince accepted visitors, usually on the full moon. Everyone who came had some request that they wanted the prince to grant. This was the tradition in every palace, in every land, all over the earth. The prince could consider the request and do his best to satisfy those he felt were worthy. Shindaemon ran over and slipped in the prince's ear. When they saw him, the ministers and courtiers all thought he was whispering something about them into the prince's ear. They all were afraid he might whisper something bad about them that would stop the prince from giving them what they wanted. So, one after another, the ministers and courtiers all began to give Shindaemon gifts. They thought that if they gave him gifts, Shindaemon might recommend them to the prince. They didn't know he was just sniffing into the prince's ear. Even their wives would give him gifts before talking to the prince. Shindaemon just smiled and accepted all they offered. He made them no promises that he would say good things about them to the prince. And so it happened, before anyone dared speak to the prince, he or she would see Shindaemon first and give him an amazing gift. Soon, the simple Amora was a very rich man. He had piles of money, beautiful gold, jewelry, jet statues, and other fine things. He had so many things that he didn't know what to do with all of them. In truth, he was now as rich as the prince, but he still lived as he always had. Then one day, the prince turned to Shinzaemon and said, "Well, Shinzaemon the Silent one, better from aren't you sorry you didn't ask for anything better from me as a reward?" He saw that Shinzaemon's lifestyle had changed very little over the last month. He wished his Lord Amora had asked for money or land. "My word, noble prince," Shinzaemon began. "Something better? Why, the favor had brought me so much more wealth than I could ever imagine. It is more than I could ever need it." He told the prince what happened. When the prince heard how Chinzaemon was making such fools out of his minister and courtiers and their wives, he laughed and laughed. He laughed so hard that tears ran down his cheeks. So much for my law advisers, the prince said. They aren't much use to me. They are all worthless as my advisers. I'll dismiss every last greedy, foolish one of them. He was actually very angry. He had trusted this pupil, and they thought they could buy his favor. He thought about beheading them all. He decided he would just fight them and all and send them away. The prince summoned his advisers one by one. As they entered his chambers, they bowed and fidgeted nervously. To each one he revealed what happened. They all apologized and began forgiveness. But the prince told them to leave the palace and not return. When the prince had finished dismissing his advisers, the only condition was that Shinzaemon must tell the prince if he ever acted like a fool. Prince Shinzaemon agreed and was given a large piece of land for his law.